Do you use pink noise to zero out the mix? I don't know if people just like making fun, but forget about this pink noise shit. I don't know who's like...
This time I know we make it. This time it's gonna be real. But if we just pretend it, who are we? This time we going easy. This time it's something real. But if we just pretend it, who are we?
Hey guys, it's very cold outside. Finally made it here to my studio. The heating is still not turned on. It's already dark outside. I spent the entire day at my mastering engineer's place. You definitely know him from previous videos. Michael, he's one of the best mastering engineers in Germany. He's doing all of the stuff for Robin Schulz. He's doing a lot of German pop rock bands that you probably all don't know. But I'd say he's like really among the top of the mastering engineers in Germany. He's responsible for all of the masters on my label, including my own songs. So I'm just happy because like whenever a song is mastered, it's done, it's finished. I'm done working here in my studio on it and it's ready for release. I can finally share it with you and everyone else on Spotify. So I thought, let's make this video another Q&A edition, but a specialized one all about mastering, and hopefully this way clarify some misconceptions about mastering. So let's do the most simple question first. What is actually mastering? Mastering, in my opinion, basically it's like the last step before you release a song. Someone else checking the EQing, the compression, to make sure it sounds good on a lot of different systems. Also making sure that you get the right loudness and then it's delivered in the right way for the right platform. So you might master it differently for vinyl, definitely, than for example for CD, or then for Spotify differently. Nowadays it's mostly just like one master if you don't release it on vinyl or CD. If it's just like an online release, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music and whatnot, you just do it in one file. Also very important to distinguish between mixing. Mixing is like being able to manipulate every single track of a song. Mastering is everything in just one file, and then there's not much you can do. You can EQ, you can compress, do some fancy stuff like multiband compression and mid-side EQing, but you're limited. So you need to make sure that your song is all done, all finished, all mixed before you send it out to a mastering engineer. So let's do the next one. How big is the difference between a mastered and not mastered song? That's pretty simple to answer. I would say it's like a 3% difference, at least like with my songs. Like years and years ago, where I was like still learning how to mix, the difference was way bigger. So the worse your songs mix, the bigger the impact of the master, but it won't still be able to rescue it to 100%. So mix as good as you can then to the mastering engineer. And to give you like a real example, let me play you my track, the one that was mastered today. First in the version that I did, like my final mix down, and then the mastered version. So for most of you, the difference might not be that big, especially if you didn't listen to this in a studio on big speakers or with good headphones. On a phone, you might even not be able to hear it, but the bass is a little bit clearer. There's definitely way more top end, and also the voice is like a little bit more compact and brought to the front of the song a tiny bit. So all in all, a nice improvement. It's really, as I already said in a couple of videos, mastering is really like a frame to a picture. It's not changing the picture, it's just making sure you can actually hang it onto a wall and that it's ready for selling it to someone. Next up, how much should you pay for mastering? I'd say between 40 euros per song up to 130, 150. That's usually the range. It really depends on who's mastering it. It depends on how bad your mix is, how long it takes to rescue it or to fix it. Then of course the name of the mastering engineer, how well known is he, what kind of other songs did he mix in the past. But yeah, I'd say like 50 is good, like for an online mastering. And if you go there in person, maybe around 80, 100, maybe 120, but above that, I don't know if it really makes a difference to pay more. And if you do an EP or an album, definitely negotiate the price to at least half of it, because if they do all of the tracks in a bunch, it's like way less time for them. Could you just make a walkthrough video of your mastering process? I don't master my own songs, and when I do master them myself just to play them in a club, I usually just use an SSL compressor to compress it slightly, like 2-3 dB of gain reduction, and a limiter, and maybe an EQ raising the top frequencies and cutting the low and the high. That's really it. I already explained all of that in a video. We'll link it up there. Let's get to the next one. What loudness does your mastering guy master your song to? It's usually nowadays around like -10 dB RMS, maybe -8, between -8 and -10. If you go louder than -8, you really start to crush your song. It of course also always depends on the song. If it's very bass heavy, you might not be able to get it that loud without destroying a lot and like weird shit. Just basically it sounds really nasty. So I would probably just use -10 dB RMS. That's like a safe way. And Spotify anyways regulates it down to -14. So yeah, there's no point anymore in loudness. Do you master to mono for DJing and stereo for releases? No, it's always a stereo release. Why would you do it in mono for DJing? No, doesn't make any sense. I know some club systems are not like really well spread out for stereo, but still stereo, 100% stereo. Would you cut the low end below 40 Hertz? I think today we cut it at 42 Hertz, the song, but just slightly, and raised it at the cutoff. So introduced like a small resonating frequency to get rid of the low mud, but still trick the listener by having a little bit more of the tiny bit higher frequencies. I would pretty much cut almost everything below like 25, 100%. You can cut it really hard because it's pointless. There's almost no speaker that can play it. It's just mud taking away energy. Cutting at 30 really depends on the song, the style, the energy of the song, if you still need more room. So just try it out, cut at 30 and listen to it. If it's like too thin in the very low end, it won't probably be too thin, then cut it away. 40 is already quite a lot, so I would go for a curve that is like very flat. And above 40 doesn't really make any sense for electronic dance music, because 45 usually your kicks start, 45 to maybe 55. If you cut into the kick, I would go back to the mixing stage and do it there. Should I master my song on the project or create a new project for it? This really depends. If you just do like a mastering for yourself to play it to your friends, do it in the project, no problem. I sometimes even mix into my mastering chain to get closer to a mastered kind of sound and to know what the limiter that is usually doing a lot to your song actually does to it, as well as the compressor. And then when I bounce it out to the mastering, I just remove the limiter and leave actually the compressor on because it's part of my sound. But if you want to do your own mastering, your final mastering to actually release your song, and you don't think you need someone else to master it, then do it in a new project. It will just prevent you from going back to the mixing stage. And also for your CPU, it's better to have less drain on your computer so you can actually hear everything and don't have any like playback mistakes by the DAW. What plugins are essential for mastering? Wow. I mean, for a very basic mastering, a limiter you can't do without. A compressor, you need one. An EQ. The rest is just like fancy, but these three you can actually get a proper mastering. Any suggestions for stock plugins mastering? Again, limiter, compressor, EQ, whatever you have, just get familiar with it and learn it and know how it behaves. and then use it. But I will leave you down below a link to my favorite plugin suite for mastering. You probably all know what I mean, but just, yeah, click on the link, check it out. It's probably the most cost-efficient mastering plugin suite on the planet. What is your signal chain on the master bus and why? Again, this depends on the songs, but usually first the EQ, then the compressor, then a limiter, if I don't have to do anything fancy in between. Really important, and that's also something Michael taught me, is to have your limiter in the chain as the last, but actually engage it first so that you hear what it sounds limited, so that you're doing everything else with considering the limiter. Because nowadays in the modern music that is driven really hard, the limiter is the biggest change in sound. The kick and the snare, like everything gets like really crushed into the limiter. It changes the sound a lot. How do you use pink noise to master? You don't use pink noise to master. I'm not doing it. I don't even know anyone that is doing it. Mastering with pink noise, no. Mixing with pink noise, also no. While we're already talking about it, it's just stupid. Anyone that recommends that is just stupid. But we already had this discussion, like, I don't know, 2 years ago, the pink noise war kind of thing. How much headroom do you need on your pre-master before sending it out to the mastering engineer? I mean, a lot of people say -6, a lot of people say -4, some say -2, some say -10. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that it doesn't clip. As long as there's any headroom, and if it's just 1 dB, that's fine. Don't leave the limiter on, just like pull down your master fader, listen to the loudest part of the song, and if you still have like 3-4 dB of headroom, you're fine. Bounce it out and then send it to the mastering guy. Tips on MS EQing. Yes, there's this fancy thing, mid-side EQing, so you can basically EQ the mid signal of the song separately to the side signal. So you could, for example, what I do on a lot of songs is making sure that everything below 250, 150 or whatever hertz is all mono, just to keep the bass in check. You could also, for example, separate the guitar from the voice, both sitting in the middle of the frequencies, the guitars to the sides. You could EQ it differently. I personally would go back to the mixing stage to fix it in the mix. If you're a mastering engineer and your clients send you stuff where you need to use mid-side EQing, maybe just ask them to redo it in their DAW and send it back. I think you get a way better result than trying to rescue it. So try avoiding using it. It's like a last rescue step if everything else fails. Did you ever have the issue with the quality of a song when uploading it, for example, to SoundCloud? Have big problems? Yeah, I mean, it's not your fault, it's SoundCloud. SoundCloud just has a really shitty sound. They changed it and made it even worse, so don't really judge songs by listening to them on SoundCloud. If your song sounds worse than other songs on SoundCloud, it will probably also sound worse on any other platform. So then it's up to you to fix your mixing. Analog versus digital. Yeah, I mean, for mastering, analog gear, yes, can definitely do stuff that digital can, but even Michael is using Ozone for certain steps. I think today he used it for like one EQing slope in between, and also for the stereo to make it a little wider. For everything else, he used his very new fancy red SPL EQ. That thing is just like cool. It's like, I wish I had something like that here, but yeah, it's really, again, a matter of taste. I think you can even achieve in the box a good master. It's more about your experience as a mastering engineer, your speakers, and your room. It's not really about the tools anymore that much. I mean, they're like small differences, but not really better or worse. It's more like a preference thing. Do you use pink noise to zero out the mix? I don't know if people just like making fun, but forget about this pink noise shit. I don't know who's like teaching that, telling everyone, but just listen to your song and just adjust the levels of each element. Why compare it against the pink noise? I mean, come on. I think that's already it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I answered your question. If not, just hit me up on Instagram, also linked down below. And if you've at least learned one thing today, then it's probably that mastering isn't that important. Just worry more about making a song that is nice, that sounds good sound design, arrangement, good lyrics, good vocals, and then you don't even have to worry about the mastering, because like the normal person that is listening to your music, they don't care if it's mastered half a dB louder or quieter, or if the kick is 1 dB too punchy or not punchy enough. It's really just about the feel of the song. If you get that right, everything else is very easy. So with that being said, it's time to end this vlog. I will now just sit here, work on the next song, still on that stay follow-up that doesn't have a name, and I'm stuck a little, but we'll get over it hopefully pretty soon.